What's up, Vikings fans? Welcome back to another edition of Vikings Spin. I'm your host, Jason, and we are coming at you right now here on Sunday night before the draft. We're doing our official draft preview here, and we're going to go over some of the correlations between top 30 visits that the Vikings get and who they actually wind up drafting. You'll see there's definitely some correlation between those. I believe it's been 4 or 5 of the past years that the Vikings have had, when they do have a first round pick, it is a player that they have visited with. So we're going to go over some of the players. Now this is pertaining, of course, to the first round of the draft. After the first round, it's pretty much been a free-for-all. It doesn't really matter if the player visited or not, or if they've even had any contact with him or not. But it does seem that the Vikings, when they're making a first-round investment into a player, they want to meet that player beforehand. So we'll talk about the players with a round 1 grade that have been in for visits with the Vikings. Now, if you are a fan of the Vikings taking an offensive lineman in the first round, you will like this list, because that's mainly what it is, with the exception of 1 or arguably 2 players. But the offensive linemen that have had top 30 visits with the Vikings include Cody Ford, tackle/guard, offensive tackle Andre Dillard, and so those are the first round guys there. I believe there could be another one here with a first round grade. I'm looking at different sites trying to confirm if this was actually a top 30 visit. Some sites saying that there is, or that there was a top 30 visit. Some sites, I don't know if maybe they just hadn't been updated yet, but it appears that they are interested in Jonah Williams, and he might have taken a top 30 visit for the Vikings as well. I've also been hearing a lot of whispers that they are going to try to target him in this draft. So that one surprised me. You got those other offensive linemen. Now these are fringe candidates for, between round 1 and 2. Titus Howard, he's getting some round 1 buzz, but probably more of a round 2 prospect. The same with Greg Little. Two offensive tackles there, and the same with Caleb McGarry, who's also been in the round 1/round 2 conversation. So there's 6 big names on the offensive line. Now the other players that have a first round grade that are not offensive linemen that they've had in for a visit, it's tight end Noah Fant, and the other one who's borderline is defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons. He's got a lot of issues off the field with him, which are probably going to hurt his draft stock. The incident of him hitting a woman back in 2016, and also the ACL injury that he suffered in preparation for the combine, which is probably going to cause him to miss half the regular season. But they did their due diligence on him as well. But there's definitely a theme of offensive linemen in the first round and maybe the second round. Other offensive linemen that they've had in for visits of note, Nate Davis, an offensive guard projected between the 3rd and 4th rounds. Offensive guard/center Michael Jordan out of Ohio State, a round 3 to 4 type of prospect there. That I'd say, if they were going to target him there. Others, the other positions are actually kind of sparse compared to the offensive line in terms of who they've had in. Tight ends, they probably spent more time on. That would probably be the second position they've spent the most time on, because they've also had Jay Sternberger in on a top 30 visit. He's a round 2 prospect, or round 2 to 3. some would say. Josh Oliver is a round 3 or 4 prospect of note that they've had in for a top 30 visit. And then you look at positions like running back, they've only had Divine Azigbo, who's a round 5 to 6 guy out of Nebraska. So they haven't really brought in a lot of running backs. Doesn't mean they won't take one, but they've only had the one guy in there for the visit. But really, these top 30 visits are, like I said, it's really only the first round that you're probably going to see. They've had someone in for a visit that's going to be their first round pick. So it would not surprise me at all if it's Noah Fant, if it's Cody Ford, if it's Andre Dillard, if it's Jonah Williams. One of these guys, they're probably going to target, whether they have to move up for them or whatever. Some other noteworthy interest, though, on the offensive line, and these could be round 2 targets for them, possibly, or the bottom of round 1 if they decided to take another position. Let's say you took Noah Fant at 18 and they want to come back up to the bottom of round 1 or the top of round 2. They've done a lot of homework on Chris Lindstrom. They're the only team to meet with him at both the Senior Bowl and the Combine. They did Senior Bowl and Combine work on Dalton Reisner and also attended his pro day. So they're very interested in him as well. Some other noteworthy guys here that they've had in on top 30 visits. As far as defensive backs, the highest rated guys for cornerback, Isaiah Johnson. For safety, they've had Amani Hooker. At linebacker, it's mostly day 3 guys with Terrell Hanks probably and Blake Cashman being the highest rated guys they've had in. Cashman was, of course, a local visit, so he doesn't count towards the top 30 count. Ryan Connolly, they had in for a visit. They've also had other interest with in the other Wisconsin linebackers, Van Ginkel and Edwards. Adam Zimmer did a lot of work with those guys, so it sounds like they're targeting a day 3 linebacker. We've talked about in our mock drafts that this is probably the last year they're going to have Kentrell Brothers on the team, so they could be looking to move on from him at the back end of the roster there at linebacker. They have had 2 kickers in on visits. One local visit with Casey Bednarski out of Minnesota State, and then they had another kicker on a regular top 30 visit that was John Barron. So they are probably going to bring in some competition for Dan Bailey. Remember, they also had a workout with the guy from the AAF. Is it Koo? The kicker Koo? I think he also was with the Chargers last year. So they're kind of sniffing around on kickers to bring in for competition at least. In terms of wide receivers, they've looked at Jeff Smith out of Boston College. This guy is probably round 7 or priority free agent type of guy. He's a speedster, just not really highly touted. Jalen Hurd, a round 4 to 5 guy, a big receiver who also has experience playing running back too. But he's been used mostly as a receiver during his last 2 years of college. Big guy, 6'4", and I believe he runs in the 4.4, so nice athletic traits there. One that I'm not sure about, I've seen some reports that there was a visit, some reports saying that there wasn't a visit, but there was combine interest in Devo Samuel, a wide receiver. He's got a round 2 grade. So you see, I think the Vikings are probably want to get an offensive lineman, and they probably want to get some sort of dynamic pass catcher in round 2 or 3. Somewhere within the first 3 rounds, I'm thinking they're going to walk out with at least one offensive lineman and one pass catcher. Now, if that's a wide receiver or a tight end, so be it. But that appears to be what they're pre-draft interest trail is indicating here. So, just wanted to kind of shed some light on the things that they're doing pre-draft, what it means. Can we follow this trail of breadcrumbs and figure out what they're going to do? Beginning on Thursday night. Of course, we have a lot of other questions in terms of how are they going to sign these rookies. They don't have enough cap space. They only have 1.6 million in cap space right now. They're going to need another million at least to get these guys signed and replacing guys that are in the top 51 now to make it work. So, it's led to some speculation. There's, we talked about Kyle Rudolph. We mentioned Everson Griffin as possibilities to be moved. We've mentioned Trey Waynes. Now, with Mike Hughes spotted at off-season workouts, that's a good sign for him. Does that mean Waynes could be back on the trade block? We don't know. But they do have to open up some cap space. Do they go with two offensive linemen very early? Like, let's say they go back-to-back O-line in round 1 and round 2. If you walk out with Dillard and McCoy like we did in our final Vikings spin mock draft, does that mean you try to move Riley Reif after June 1st when you can save $9.5 million on the cap? Plus you're going to save money on next year's cap because you've only got $7 million to work with for 2020. So, a lot of these things are up in the air. I'm sure that they're keeping their options open to see if they get any trade offers for these guys. Teams probably know the Vikings have to make some cap room, and they're probably thinking that there's going to be some guys that could possibly be had on the block. It just depends on the compensation. I mean, the Vikings can keep all those guys that I mentioned, Rudolph, Griffin, Reif, Waynes. You can keep them all for 2019, but other guys are going to have to go. So I mean, if you draft an offensive tackle, but you're still going to start Riley Reif, does that mean that Rashad Hill goes? Do you really need Sean Mannion if he doesn't beat out, Kyle Slaughter for the backup job? I'm sure they'll find another way to make just enough cap space to get by. But, you do have to also think in terms of 2020 cap space as well. So, it'll be interesting to see who gets moved here. And then we've got to speculate too. Will the Vikings try to come away with 9 picks in this draft, 10 picks in this draft, 8 picks, 7 picks? What's Rick Spielman going to do? I think a lot of it probably depends on how the board falls. If Jonah Williams makes it to pick 15, I think they'd probably seriously, be considering trading up to go get him. If there's multiple offensive linemen still on the board, let's say that you've got your choice at 18 of Cody Ford, Dalton Reisner, Chris Lindstrom, Garrett Bradbury. Let's say that they're still all on the board, and Baltimore wants to trade up from 22. Not all those guys are going to go, within 3 or 4 picks. So, that's something that you consider making that trade, picking up another 3rd round pick. That could be well worth your while. A lot of things that they can do here, rather than just, see what you've got at 18. They could move up, they could move down. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. But hopefully this gives you guys more of an idea of who they're seriously looking at in terms of a 1st round pick, who they've actually met with, and it seems to be the Vikings' MO to meet with people before they're going to invest a 1st round pick in them. So I thank you guys so much for tuning in to this draft preview edition of Viking Spin. Can't wait for Thursday night. Be watching Friday and Saturday too. All the rounds are going to be important. Definitely, though, Rick Spielman should try to focus on making his hay in the top 3 rounds of the draft because that's where you got your bigger hits. But like I said, thanks again for tuning in with me, and let's just sit back and enjoy the show on Thursday night. So long.